Hello everyone, this is Lori from Grammy's Keepsakes, and I'm doing a voiceover today because my tutorial part 2 did not record any of the sound. So I hope this works out. What we're going to do is we're making the flap for this back panel today and the stacked pockets. So what we need first is our spare file folder, and going to go ahead and trim off the edge to make it square. So cut it at the 45 degrees or 90 degrees, and so that we have a nice edge. And then go ahead and cut it down the natural fold so that you have two pieces. Now what we're going to do is cut off the two tabs so that we have a nice straight edge. So go ahead and cut a 1/2 inch off, and that will be enough so that you get a nice straight edge. Okay, now we're going to measure over 4 7/8 inches and cut that so that you have a long, skinnier piece. And this flap is going to fit inside our back panel. Now we're going to measure 11 inches and cut that off. So if you have a piece of cardstock that is 11 inches, you can go ahead and just cut it at 4 7/8. Now we're going to score. Get out your scoreboards. Putting the long side along the top. Our first score mark is at 3/4 inch. Next score mark, 1 inch. Come over to 8 1/2 and score. Put the scoreboard away. And go ahead and fold on all those score marks. One is going to be the pocket, and the other two are to give us some room in our hinge. And I'm just erasing off the handwriting of my measurement that I put on there. Now we're going to angle cut up to that first score mark, and the other side as well. Makes for a neater finish. And so this is what our folds look like. Burnishing it down. We're going to put another pocket right there. So we have a scrap of our cardstock from before, and we're going to go ahead and cut that at 5 7/8 inches. Now we're going to cut it. Okay, we cut it 3 inches by 5 7/8. The 5 7/8 at the top, and go ahead and score at 1/2 inch and 5 3/8. And that is all the scoring that we're going to do on that. And we're going to go ahead and put away the scoreboard and make those mountains into valleys. Burnish down our creases, and it's going to fit just over that other score mark. Don't put it on the score mark. We want it to be above it. But before we do that, we're going to cover it with one of our decorator pages and do some stitching. That's why we're not going to attach them yet. But I did go ahead and glue it, and then I unassembled it after I remembered I wanted to sew it, because that's how it goes. So don't do this part, because I'll just have you go ahead and open it up again. And I think now is when I realized it's like, oops, we need to put that paper down. Luckily, it hadn't dried completely. So we're going to choose our paper, and we're going to go ahead and rip it to fit. So first we're going to rip it just left of that dark blue center line from the fold. And save the other piece. We're going to use it later. And just measuring, it is 3 inches, but I need it to be a little bit less so that we get a craft cardstock margin around our decorated paper. and make a little mark so that I know where to rip. Now to get it straight. That's the hard part for me. Now we're measuring so we can get the width or the length, and go ahead and rip that, because we don't want that margin. We want just the blue. And I ripped it crooked. So we're going to just try to fix it. Hold down tight on the ruler so it doesn't get away. Mission accomplished. And then go around and distress it. Got the glue book, some glue stick, get it good and sticky. And I'm folding that flap or pocket back over where it's supposed to be so that I don't get my image upside down. Centering it top to bottom and side to side the best you can. Mine are always a little wonky, but it works. It's the handcrafted look, right? Now we're going to stitch all the way around it. But it looks like first I'm going to go ahead and cover the other pocket first so we can stitch them both at the same time. And this is the design we're going to use this time. And go ahead and rip it down the center, right there by those lines. And put the other half away. We're going to use it later. And we're just going to use that part on the bottom with the image to fit that little pocket. Trying to cut or rip straight. The struggle is real. And I've got my lines there to help me, so it'll make it easier to rip it straight. And we're going to measure again so that I get it to be wide enough. And ink around the edges. I like to use some distress ink. It gives it more of that vintage, worn look. Get the glue book again. running out of glue stick, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's working. Trying to center it again on the pocket, side to side and top to bottom. And burnish it down, get it good and stuck. We're going to cover that. We're going to use one of the pieces that we were already using and go ahead and rip off that margin. And we're not going to rip off that bottom. It's going to hide right underneath the flap of the pocket there. So we're going to leave that right how it is. Just ink around the edges. I have a pencil mark there I wanted to rub off. I recorded this video yesterday, last night, and when I went to upload it and release it this morning, it got rid of all of the voice, and so this is a learning curve. Never done this before. I hope it works. It's kind of odd though watching myself work on the video. Okay, folding over that flap on the top, that little hinge, to make sure that I get it a little bit of margin room from the top so that it looks right, and center it from side to side. You wiggle it now before it gets dry and set on. Burnish it very well. We're going to have some stitching, but you want the glue to stick really well first. And that's what that side's going to look like. Now we're going to do the inside. And we've saved that piece. We're going to use it now. Go ahead and rip off that margin next to the lines. Ink all the way around it. And do a little bit of a dry fit there, making sure that my glue book isn't sticky. So I'm flipping the page over and apply glue. And again, we're going to make sure that we get it close to the edge, but leave a little margin and center it from side to side. turning it around so I can see it better without getting my head in the camera. Had to wipe off my fingers. They were pretty sticky. Making a little bit of room so I can get that sewing machine right up there. And we're sewing it with the blue thread. And we're sewing across the top of the pocket. Only the top. You don't have to do this. I just like the look of it, and I choose to add that extra dimension and security. We're going to flip it over and do the top of the other pocket on the other side. Get rid of my threads. Now we're going to go ahead and glue it down again. Second time is the charm. So just apply glue to that tab area and along the bottom, and flip it over, stick it down. And flipping over the flap and applying glue on each short side of that pocket flap and press it down. We're going to sew it also, but that gluing will help us keep it in place. So now we're going to sew. We're not going to sew around that flap or the hinge part at the top. We're going to sew all the way around the big panel. And that panel is the 4 7/8 wide, and it's 7.5 inches long. Pivoting at each of my corners. And clip the threads. And now ink all the way around where on the bobbin side of the sewing, the part that was down against the bed of the machine, I'm using my ink dauber and going over all those lines, because where it punctured the paper, it leaves a little white space, and by adding that distress ink, it camouflages it. Now this is how it's going to fit inside of our little book back cover. And just that short, that 3/4 inch section, we're centering that in our book, not too close to the spine. We want it closer there to the hinge fold over portion than we do to the spine, because we don't want it to interfere with the journals that we're going to put in our little book. So glue that 3/4 inch panel generously. It's got to hold the weight and the wear and tear. Folding that over, centering it, lining up the top of the book to the top of that score fold. And double checking and press it down. There I'm showing how it's centered, and we're going to go ahead and sew it over the top of the previous stitching to help secure that panel and not have to rely just on the glue. And that flange part of that hinge we will camouflage later after we do our stacked pockets, and we'll give it a little bit of a camouflage so they won't see the workings and the construction of the flap. Now we're going to do the stacked pockets. Get that machine out of the way. Make some room. We want to get the other half of the file folder that we were saving. We're going to use it now. We're going to go ahead and cut 5 7/8 inches and cut it the long way. 5 7/8. And if you have a piece of cardstock, it will be 11 inches long or tall and 5 7/8 wide. Put the short end up at the top of the scoreboard. We're going to score at 1/2 inch and 5 3/8. 1 tick mark left of the 1/2 inch. And then we rotate it so the long edge is at the top and score at 1/2 inch. Scoreboard can be put away. And we're going to angle those corners now. See where those corners meet? We're going to angle that right there. That reduces the bulk when we go to make the pocket. Fold over that mountain into a valley and burnish. Now we're going to cut our pockets. And from that bottom, we're going to measure up 4 inches from that fold on the bottom edge and go ahead and cut that. Fold over our hinges, burnish them down. That's going to be the bottom pocket. Now we're going to make the other pockets. So we're going to take this piece and we're going to measure over 2 inches and cut. Again, 2 more inches and cut again. And if you're using the file folder, your last piece is going to be longer. And even if you're using the cardstock, you'll have that last piece be a little bit longer. It's okay. It doesn't matter. It's not going to interfere with the makings of the pocket. So there we have our 3 pieces. They're going to be 3 pockets. And see how that bottom one is wider? It's okay, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to move the book aside. We're going to measure 3/4 of an inch from one of the edges and mark it in the margin or on the tab up to the score mark. This is going to be a handy little mark in just a moment. You want to do this to each of the 3 pieces. Now we're going to grab our scissors and we're going to cut on that line up to the score mark. Now we're going to rotate it a little bit and we're going to angle it down to the end. And we're cutting off that little bit of a triangle. And here I'm starting from the bottom and going up to that mark. But in the next one, I do it a little bit different way so that you can choose which way is more comfortable for you. But it's important to cut straight across on that line so you have that shape for each of the pockets. Now the last one. We're going to cover with some of the decorated or digital print paper on that large 4-inch pocket. And there's our image. Grab your tear ruler, and I'm going to go ahead and tear the bottom first, being careful. No, don't get his hat, because we're going to use that image in something else. So we just want that top portion. And it measures about 4 inches from the bottom, approximately. Go ahead and rip. It's going against grain in the paper though, so it takes a little bit more effort. Now we're going to trim off that edge. That is from the fold line of the DigiPrint. And it's a little bit different color, and we want to rip that off. Hold the ruler down tight so it doesn't slip. And now we'll try it on for size and mark where we need to rip it to get that margin off, so it will fit on our pocket. Now we're going to measure and get the height of the pocket. On both sides, and then you can use that to make sure your ruler is straight. And rub off my pencil marks. And ink all the way around all 4 sides. Get the glue book out, the glue stick, and make it good and sticky. And you want to make sure that you get your pocket facing the right direction so that the top of your print is at the top of the pocket. That little flap is the bottom of the pocket. Side to side and top to bottom, get it centered. Burnishing it down. And sew all the way around it. And when you're sewing, have the flaps in the open position so you're not sewing them down. because we're going to need that for our full-size pockets later. Clipping off all my strings. And fold your flaps in, burnishing them down, and apply glue to each of the 3 tabs. Grab your book, panel up, and line it up with the bottom of the book and centering it between the spine and the corrugated scored part for our rollover hinge. Have it closer to the scored part than the hinge, or the spine, excuse me, because we don't want anything interfering with that spine. But make sure it is flush with the bottom of the book. Now we're going to take our other 3 little pockets. I'm inking the top portion. That's what we'll show. It's not necessary to do the bottom of them. They will be hidden inside each other, because this is a stacked or a layered pocket. Fold over those little bitty tabs. That's the top of your pocket. Those tabs that have that nice square cut is going to fit inside your previous pocket, and it'll be an automatic stop so that they end up in there nice. Go ahead and fold all of your little flaps. I'm showing you an example. See how you don't want to get your flap tangled up with the flap that's already glued down. You want it to come in between them. So go ahead and put glue and hold it in the center and insert it so that it gets right underneath the top part of the pocket, and leaving the previously glued flap down against the book so that it doesn't get hooked up. And press it down and go ahead and do the next one. It makes for nice, easy, separated pockets. The pockets do go all the way down to the bottom, each one of them. So they're not short pockets. They just have a little short space. It adds a nice little look. And the last one. Good thing the branding is on the inside of the pocket, right? See, got to feel for the paper to make sure that it fits in there nice. Pressing it down. Okay. Now what I'm showing you is the little part that we're decorating, and that's going to camouflage that flange that we made. So you won't be able to see the inner construction workings. And there it is on our ephemera page. So we have to go ahead and remove it. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut the large journaling cards out of there first so that I don't accidentally rip it with the tearing ruler. And put that aside. We're going to finish cutting it later when we need it. And go ahead and remove that one also. Cutting on the line. And now I'm going to leave a lot of little margin there and put the ephemera aside. And now we can determine where we want to tear. So try to get it as straight as you can. Get the top of the little ovals. We're not going to worry about the bottom of the ovals because they're going to fit inside the pocket. But we have to get them from side to side, they have to fit. So we're going to measure and mark those. And it has to fit inside the pocket. So I'm going to rip it just a little bit shy of the full length. And I hold down tight and rip carefully. And then we can go ahead and ink. And do a dry fit, because now is the time to change it if we need to. Grab that glue book and glue it up. and get it down there in the pocket and get it nested, and then bring it up carefully and get it centered side to side, leaving yourself a little bit of margin up there at the top before that score line. And burnish it down. And the stacked pockets are done. And this is how it sets with that little bit of a 1/4 inch leeway in the flap. It allows you to stuff your pockets. Now what we're going to do is this is what I'm showing you that we're going to do in the next video, in the next part 3. All the ephemera and the goodies for the pockets, and we're going to measure out where the eyelets are going to go. I don't insert the eyelets today, but we're measuring. And because our flap is a 1/4 inch wide to allow for the pocket room, we put our first eyelet at a 1/2 inch, or in the center of that spine, because our flap is taking up the last 1/4. And there you see on the other one I have finished. One is, we have a mark at the 1/2 inch, and just left of it to 1/4 inch. And it's easier to see if you open up that flap. And measuring down the 1/2 inch, make the little mark, and the 1/4 inch. Make the little mark, and now coming down to the bottom, 1/2 inch from that, and then over another 1/4 inch. Then the center is going to be in the center top to bottom, but a 1/2 inch over, so that it will line up with our top and bottom eyelets. And when we're punching the holes and setting the eyelets in the next part, I'm a little more clear on how to get that accomplished. So this is wrapping it up. I want to thank you for watching. Have a creative day.